We've obviously heard the news in the industry that Compass is buying Anywhere. Got a few thoughts on it. I just kind of verbally processing it with you guys, so forgive me if it's a little bit of rambling at the end, but a few points that I'll make. See what your thoughts are. Thanks so much. Welcome to Rethink Real Estate. My name is Ben Brady, and this is a real estate podcast aimed to deliver sales strategies, marketing tips, and business insights from industry experts and myself to build a listing-focused business for the future. Let's get into it. So I thought that with the news of Compass taking over Anywhere, and basically them taking over real estate in sense of an acquisition, I wanted to sort of just digest my own thoughts after having a bit of time thinking about it. It's obviously old news at this point. It's all that anybody can speak about. But there's a couple of things that stand out to me from the very beginning of all of this. First and foremost is that obviously the industry's been under a great deal of scrutiny over the last little while from the DOJ in perspective to collusion when it comes to the commission. So I don't believe that the DOJ would let this go through from a purchase perspective. Now, I want to be very upfront is that I'm pretty naive when it comes to how all the regulatory things work and ultimately how that works. But if I'm just using some common sense in this equation is that creating more collusion within the industry probably isn't something that they're going to let go through. Now, this could be completely made up information, so I probably need to check the sources, but I was under the impression that 1 out of every 5 deals that happened in the US, or one out of every 5 transactions in the US, there was an Anywhere agent involved. So, that's 1/5 market share of the entire US market. I'm not sure if you could say North America, but the US market at least. And then you add Compass on there, who's the largest transaction volume in all of the US as well. At the end of the day, I would have thought that that is some level of monopoly that, if Google's scrutinized or if certain companies are scrutinized for having a large market share within an industry, but then also being that there was under the scrutiny of the DOJ from a collusion perspective. I understand that might be in a different administration, and maybe that's one of the reasons that they've seen this as an ultimate opportunity. But I do think that there's got to be some headwinds in order for this deal to go all the way through. Now, what do we think happens if it does go all the way through? I don't think much. Don't get me wrong, the thing that really doesn't make sense to me at this point, and again, I'm just verbally processing this, is that you've got 2 companies that are not profitable that have then merged to triple the debt and, in essence, try to become profitable with the burden of debt. And I think about it is that I understand that the timing from a Compass perspective is the marketplace hasn't been great, or there is a headwind within the market, so the share price has been down. But, Anywhere real estate losing as much money as it ultimately did through pretty decent marketplaces. And then also Compass, that is one of those businesses that we all know is incredibly cash heavy in the sense of that it costs a lot of money to run that type of business. Don't get me wrong, they are all stemming to the factor that they are consolidating the traditional brokerage model. But I look at that in the sense that, $2.6 billion of the debt is, or $2.2 billion of the $2.6 billion is actually Century 21, which is a decaying brand. There's no doubt about that. So I wonder whether or not they're going to clean that up in any way, shape, or form. Maybe they don't have to. But then also Compass, I'm unsure of what their debt obligations are to their investors that invested. Maybe there wasn't any debt raised. Maybe it was just equity. Maybe they didn't raise any more debt. I'm not sure. And again, I haven't, as you can appreciate, is that I haven't looked too deeply into this. I'm just giving some general thoughts. But all in all, the one thing that I think that it does change from an industry-wide perspective is that where I do see an opportunity is not in the boutique, but in this mid-tier range that we kind of find ourselves in, to be honest. Is that, let me give you an example. Before the news, I was in Bend, Oregon. In Bend, Oregon, it is it's Central Oregon. It's a dead center of Oregon. Wonderful marketplace. It's seen some really ups and downs within the financial crisis, but it's now become a really big regional marketplace. It's got one of the highest average sale prices in all of Oregon, being Bend, Oregon. Only 4% of the residents that actually live in Central Oregon can afford Bend, so there's a great deal of people that are moving into it. Think of it kind of like a Boise. Think of it kind of a, maybe more of it wouldn't be a Denver, but it'd be more like a pretty large mountain town, like a Boulder, for example. Maybe not to that extreme points of Colorado being the price points of that. I don't believe it's anywhere near as expensive as Boulder. But where I'm going here is that our office for Harcourts, we have a franchise in Central Oregon. They have both a Bend office, they have a Redmond office. It is the most successful franchise that we have in our company. A great business, $10+ million in GCI, run by three ladies that are just awesome and that have been legacied into the business by taking it over from their mum. And anyway, it's a close-knit family. I don't need to give you too much of the details, but I was doing some recruiting for them because they're really making a push in their recruitment efforts. And interestingly enough, it's funny because of the corporate nature of what the businesses are with, say, the Pacific Northwest. And in the Pacific Northwest, you have companies like Windermere, you have companies like Sotheby's, you have companies like, the Better Homes and Gardens. You have, some of these larger organizations, including Remax, including Coldwell Banker and things along those lines. And one of the things that I definitely was able to recruit to when we were there, we've recently put on, a couple of pretty high performers. We've got a fair few others in the pipeline coming from some major brands. But one of the things that they definitely commented on was the institutionalized feel of those companies. So I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. Is that, for example, there is a company. I kind of should probably keep these nameless, but yeah, I'll try to. But let me just tell you this: they have a balloon in their icon. There you go. Maybe that's better. But they are part of one of the largest conglomerates of that franchise. I think they're part of a 30 to 40 office network. And then also another agent that was with a company where Warren Buffett's name is thrown around with quite often. There you go. Hopefully you guys can decipher what ones they are. But again, part of a very, very large franchise company. I think with that one, it was one of 50 offices within within all of the Pacific Northwest. Anyway, where I'm going with this is that the agents, one of the first things that I always do in an interview is that, tell me what's working where you are. Tell me what's not working. I'd love to understand that just to see whether or not this is going to be a great fit. And one of the things they said is that they feel like they are just a number. And there's no doubt about that when you get to the real estate brokerage element and the larger brokerages, that definitely can have a feel. But a situation that I was given is that they were made to put a ticket in when they had an actual broker question on an actual deal. They forgot about it, and then they had to be followed up the following day. This was an actual quite an urgent broker question that they needed in the midst of a deal. Also, then one of the agents' emails went down, and to get some type of tech support, it took 3 days to do so. And then the other thing was that both of them actually mentioned in two separate companies they've never spoken to the same support person more than once. There's no individual localization, and that's where I do believe that if you go with the philosophy that sort of we have and what many of these other companies have is local ownership. The ladies who owned our Bend location or the Central Oregon part of it, they're always going to be there, and they're the owners of the Central Oregon location. It's not going to be another franchise owner that has a location, over in Portland or Seattle that then services the Central Oregon part. And in those regional marketplaces, it was funny to see that we obviously put such an emphasis on our Central Oregon marketplace because it is our best office or best group within the company. And to hear these other people talk about the structure of the corporate real estate side of it as that it's the redheaded stepchild market, when it's one of the best marketplaces in all of Oregon. Well, it is. I'd say it is the best marketplace in all of Oregon, from turnover, from average sale price, everything along those lines. It doesn't have the same socioeconomic issues that Portland does and all these different things. But the funny part about it is that when something gets as big as those 30 or 40 or 50 offices from an individual ownership perspective, I'm not talking about individual franchises or whatever. I'm talking about the franchises that had 50, 60 franchises within the bigger brands. People sort of definitely feel that they are just the number. Now, don't get me wrong. There's an element of people say that the EXP agents or the real agents or whatever that love that level of independence. A lot of them actually, I've got to be honest, a lot of our recruiting has actually been targeted towards them because they are feeling incredibly lonely at the moment. There's no doubt about that, just from a real estate office perspective. Because again, for those that don't understand what I'm talking about, we have an auction business that is separate white label that we offer it to all agents. Then we have our Harcourts business that is our real estate business. And the part of all of this that I'm trying to get to is that Anywhere in its brands were already in a position where one of their best brands is a very big luxury brand called Sotheby's. And the conversations that we are having around the corporately owned elements of all of those is unbelievable, in the sense of the lack of support that people feel, the lack of connection that they feel, the lack of culture within a location, because the people that are running it have absolutely no upside in it, have absolutely no accountability to it. In essence, is that it's a play in order. I just don't think real estate with the assets, when the assets have legs, can be those big plays of acquisitions and mergers. Like a really prominent company within all of the Pacific Northwest is Sotheby's, and Sotheby's did a merger with Hassan, and merging those two cultures didn't go well. But then also now, they sold it to a private equity firm, that whole conglomerate within the Pacific Northwest, or it might only just be Oregon. I'm not really sure of the deal. But the feedback from the agents is that it honestly feels like it's run as a corporate entity, not as a brokerage, where the people that own it have our best interests at heart and are trying to build a business with us all the way through. And I think that that's where the culture and the connection element of it, something that I've always struggled with, in a sense of thinking that has got to be tangible value. I believe that there has to be tangible value as well as that in order to show complete value. But going back to the primary point in all of this is that I don't believe that this does a good thing for the industry. I believe that it shows that the traditional real estate brokerage from a large perspective is kind of going the way of the yellow pages companies. Scott Galloway, a gentleman I speak about quite often, that I listen to very regularly, he made a great deal of money in the early days of when the yellow pages were in the wind-up mode, when the internet was obviously first come to light, and then it got more efficient. The yellow pages, what he would do is buy up all the yellow pages companies, and then cut costs quicker than what they were losing revenue. And in essence is that then obviously the gap in building the conglomerate together in a bigger way is he made a lot of money over a period of time, because nothing ever goes away as quickly as what anyone thinks. And I think that maybe we are in that cycle. I don't know whether or not that was Compass's play, but are we in the cycle of those big conglomerates slowly going down and down and down and down and down? And maybe this is what Compass needed to do in order to get a deeper of exposure of international stuff, or international or different markets outside of the US in order to grow. Obviously, it's a good play if this is a very, very long-term play, but I do believe that an industry as a whole within that sector of it, in the traditional brokerage model, could be in the slow decline when it's not in the localized marketplace perspective, where you've got people that live and run the business, that are accountable to the business in that sector. I still think that the perfect model when it comes to real estate ownership is local ownership. Real estate office ownership is local ownership, local accountability, being able to look the business owner in the eyes as an agent and know that they're the person responsible. Knowing who you're talking to, and that's where we've had some really great success, knowing that you're talking to me who owns Harcourts here in North America, not some massive conglomerate that a CEO that was worried about a stock price or worried about their job that really doesn't have any individual upside to it. And I think that that could be the way of the future for real estate, to have really some serious success locally. Anyway, I'm rambling at this point, but hopefully there's some thoughts there that make a little bit of sense. And at the end of the day, we see this as a really gigantic opportunity for us, because I think it's going to be very clinical, the way that this is all going to come together, if in fact it actually does. Thanks so much. So about 75% of our audience hasn't liked, followed, or subscribed to our podcast. It would mean the world to us, and it would help this podcast more than you know to expand our reach if you were to like, follow, or subscribe on any of the platforms that you're watching or listening on. Thanks again.